a YA paranormal, a middle grade fantasy mystery, and a YA romance. What do these three things have in common? Welcome to Mr. Francy Reads! Welcome back to Mr. Francy Reads. Today we are doing my reading vlog for the first 2 weeks of March because I haven't done one yet. I got a little bit behind with certain things going on. I was away, then I wasn't feeling well, but I am back. I'm right as rain. So I am so happy to be here with you guys to talk reading vlog stuff, give you guys an update on what I have been reading in the first 2 weeks. And you know what? I have to say, one of my favorite things about reading vlogs is that I have more time to talk about the books that I have been reading, because today I'm talking to you about 3 separate books, where usually in a monthly wrap I'm talking about 10 or more, and there's not a lot of time to get into it. So if you are here, welcome, and let me know in the comments below by leaving me a smiley face emoji. And if you have not subscribed before, please do. It costs nothing and really does help my channel. While you're down there, hit that bell ding so that you can receive all the notifications and be alerted each and every time I upload so that you don't miss anything. Alright everyone, let's begin. So the first book that I read in the month of March, wow, can you believe we're in March, is this book, Eclipse by Stephanie Meyer. So this is a YA paranormal book. It is the 3rd book in the Twilight series. So when the Twilight series first came out, I read all of the 4 books. There's now 5, but I read all of the 4 books at that time and I loved them. But I had not read any of them since coming onto booktube. And I thought it might be a good idea to get back into the series and critique them with a much more critical eye than I had when they were first published. Well, that idea went right out the window as soon as I started book 1, because book 1 just kind of washed all over me, and I was just lost in this world, but in the best way. Like, I was there. I was not here in my home reading book 1. I was there with everyone. So I decided to continue on with the series, and I loved book 2 just as much, and book 3 was just as fantastic also. I believe, if I remember correctly, which is funny because I didn't read them that long ago, but I believe I gave book 1 and 2 5 stars, and I also did the same with book 3. What I will say, because there's not a lot I can say with it being book 3, but there's also not a lot I can say because there's not that much that actually happens, is that it's more of a setup for book number 4. Now, what's really interesting for me is I'm not someone who enjoys books that are there to be a setup, or, in other words, a filler book for a series, but I love this series so much that, quite frankly, I got to the end of the book and said, it's filler, but I don't care. I still love it so much that, I mean, if this book was a triple tome, I think I would still enjoy it so much. I love being in this world. So, in case you don't know, the Twilight Saga series follows a girl by the name of Bella Swan, who ends up along the way meeting 2 different characters. One is named Edward Cullen, the other is named Jacob Black. Edward Cullen, there is more to him than meets the eye that you see on surface level, and that is that he is a vampire. Jacob Black, meanwhile, is a werewolf. And so it becomes a really interesting and intriguing series because not only do we have these paranormal aspects that come up in the book, and Bella is human, so it's interesting for her. She never knew that vampires existed, let alone werewolves existing, but also we get a ton of world building in book 1, which I really appreciated. In book 2, we focus a lot more on Jacob. I'm not going to say why, but we do. And I appreciated that because we got even more of a backstory from him. In this book, we once again focus on Edward, which I appreciated, but we still get more backstory from Jacob and the wolves and their history and stuff like that. I love this world building so much. I'm such a sucker for the world building in this series. And a lot of people have said to me that they either don't like it or don't think the series is the best or that it's well written, things like that. But I'm just so incredibly forgiving of all of those things because of just how much it's easier for me to sink into these worlds. So I love it. I honestly feel like after I read book 4, maybe I should just go back and read book 1 again because I'm just having so much fun. But yeah, I gave this book 5 stars, and if you have not read the Twilight Saga series, I do highly recommend it. There are always differences between books and their film or TV show adaptations. So even if you've only seen the films or even one of the films, then reading the book is also a good idea because there are things that the films, and the first film at least, but all of them, did miss. So yeah, but I loved it and I gave it 5 stars. So the next book that I read in the month of March was a book that was recommended to me by my dear friend Jessica from Lady Lovestead Reads. I celebrated my 2-year booktube anniversary towards the end of January this year, and by doing so I asked some of my booktuber buddies to recommend a book for me to celebrate the occasion. Jessica from Lady Lovestead Reads recommended this book, Winter House, by Ben Gutterson. So this is a middle grade, well, it's marketed as a middle grade fantasy, and I don't know how much I agree with that, to be honest. I'm going to call this a middle grade fantasy mystery, or rather the other way around, a middle grade mystery fantasy, because while there are some fantastical elements, it's very minimal. And the majority of the book we're focusing on a mystery. So in this book we are following Elizabeth. Her blood parents ended up not being able to take care of her for one reason or another, and so she ends up living with her aunt and uncle. They treat her horribly, but one day she comes home to find a note that is advising her that she needs to go over to Winter House, which is a hotel, because her aunt and uncle have gone away, and they don't trust her to be at home, in their home alone. So Elizabeth begrudgingly makes her way over to Winter House. We learn a lot of things about Elizabeth in the first quarter of the book. I have to say, I do, upon reflection, all in all, appreciate that we did learn as much as we did in the first quarter of the book about her, but for me it did go a little bit too slowly, and that did affect my star rating. But one thing that we do find out is that Elizabeth loves puzzles. She loves answering puzzles and figuring out different things. She also loves creating lists. I don't think there is a list Elizabeth has not created yet, and I just really enjoyed that. I love smart, strong, highly intelligent female characters. And when I get that in a middle grade, I love it even more. So I knew that I was going to be in for something good, but didn't quite know what it was. Once Elizabeth gets to Winter House, things start going down, and there's a mystery that she needs to solve where her very intellectual puzzle solving skills that she has comes in handy. I don't want to spoil too much because I really think that this is a book that needs to be read for the first time without me saying too much more than that. But I will say, once the mystery started to get going, I really found myself enjoying this book a lot. Again, I'm kind of surprised that it's labeled as a fantasy rather than like a mystery with fantasy elements, but as I said, I had a lot of fun. This book was very reminiscent of the Nevermore series, which is right here, funny enough, which is a series that I am actually buddy reading with Jessica from Lady Lovestead Reads, and so I really appreciate that because I love that series as well. Both of them are set at a hotel where certain interesting things go down, so I very much appreciated the similarities there. Elizabeth ends up making a really good friend called Freddie, and I love Freddie. He's a straight up great guy, and so I appreciated that. Towards the end of the book, something comes up with Elizabeth that kind of tells her what she needs to do in order to fix something that's going on. I hope that's vague enough. But to me, I'm going, oh, okay, you've been given the answer. It's right there. Great. So just do this thing that you need to do and you will be fine. And yet, Elizabeth ends up going, oh, okay, this is nice, moving on, let's go and do something else. And I don't get why. And then 3 whole chapters later, she finally does the thing that she knew she needed to do 3 chapters ago. Now, I'm not trying to complain too much. I think for a middle grade book, this is fantastic. And I think that children will not have an issue with this. But for me, if I'm looking at it at my age with a critical eye, it just annoyed me. You're being handed something on a silver platter, and you're basically ignoring this thing. And it just annoyed me. So if you've read the book and you want to talk about that aspect with me, please do so. One thing that I found very interesting during the course of my reading this book was just how interested you guys were to hear what my thoughts were. Seriously, not a day went by when I was not getting a comment from someone somewhere, whether it was in my videos or on publicly on my Discord or privately on my Discord. A lot of people asking me, Mr. Francy, I want to know your thoughts and feelings. I want to know about Winterhouse. Winterhouse. Like, oh, goodness me. And the sad thing was, within the first quarter, I really wasn't enjoying it that much because it was just taking a little bit too long to get anywhere. And I just kept thinking, oh no, I'm going to let so many people down. But eventually I did really enjoy this book and got on board with it, I think from the second quarter onwards. So I ended up giving this book 4 stars because for me, I don't feel I can give a book 5 stars when the first quarter really did let me down as much as it did. So I end up going for 4 stars, but that's still a really good rating. I do recommend this book. If you're someone who does not like slow beginnings, I do recommend getting through the slog that is the first quarter of the book, the slog in my opinion, that is the first quarter of the book, because it is really worth it, because the mystery that we are dealing with that Elizabeth is trying to solve is incredibly intriguing. So I do highly recommend it. 4 stars from me. The next book that I read was this book, Listen to Your Heart by Casey West. This is a young adult straight romance book, and I am still trying to figure out what I'm giving this book because I literally only finished it today, but I think I'm also probably going to give this book 4 stars. This is not the first Casey West book that I have read. I read P.S. I Like You, I think 2 years ago, and I really loved that book so much that last year I picked up Lucky in Love and loved that one just as much. So it's safe to say for me, while I don't love every single straight romance that I read, I do have some select authors that I do trust fully, wholly and completely, and Casey West is definitely one of them. A really unfortunate thing is that I have to order these books because we don't sell Casey West books in bookstores in my area. I have looked. I've even asked if they can get them in. No one seems to be able to. What's going on? Should I just move to America? Seriously, I think I should. I think I'm just going to pack up my stuff and, you know, just grab a few people that I want to bring with me and we'll just all fly over and live in America. It'll just make my reading life so much easier. But anyway, the premise of this book is that we are following a woman by the name of Kate. Sorry, not a woman. A girl. We're following a teenager by the name of Kate who ends up enrolling in a podcast class at her high school. This is an extracurricular activity that she's decided to take up under the advice of her parents because they want her to diversify her way of thinking. Despite the fact that she's only a teenager, Kate already knows the path she wants to go down and the career she wants to have, and her parents are just a little bit concerned that she might be being a little bit closed-minded, so they want her to try different things. So she ends up taking on this podcast extracurricular activity class, and the podcast needs to revolve around something to do with the high school, but she's really not looking forward to it, and she's really nervous on the first day that she gets there. On the second day of the class, the teacher ends up announcing the assigned roles that everyone in the class is going to have, and Kate is thrust front and center because she is going to be one of the 2, what do you call it? Like the people who talk in the podcast. I don't even know what the terminology is, but you know what I mean. One of the people who is actually on the air talking. So that's interesting because Kate is not extroverted. So it's going to be a challenge for her. What ultimately ends up being decided, because the theme of the podcast does change every year, is that it's going to be an advice podcast this year. So students can phone in or they can email in asking questions to get advice from Kate and Victoria, who is the other student who is doing the on-air aspect of this podcast. And so I found that to be incredibly interesting, but it is a YA romance, and that much is very clear because we are dealing with a lot of your typical teenage tropes, like crushes and boys and things like that. However, what links this book to the other two books that I read is that there's a mystery that comes up in this book. There was a mystery that came up in Eclipse, but I didn't want to say what it was because it's a spoiler. There are actually a couple of mysteries that come up in this book, but I really enjoyed this book. One thing that I really did not appreciate about this book, though, and it says a lot for me to say a con for a Casey West book because I just love her books, but one con that I had was I very quickly worked out who, and it took our protagonist Kate such a long time to work out who these people were. And when she finally worked, when she finally worked out who it was written as such a massive reveal, and yet for me, I was just like, are you serious? I worked this out so early on, and I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just, I'm not a teenager, so I'm not the target audience, but otherwise, I really enjoyed the book, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. But in the end, those were the books that I read. Overall, I really enjoyed these books. So, as I said, I'm giving them 5 stars, 4 stars, and 4 stars. They are really high ratings, so I highly recommend each and every one of them. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it, letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching. And of course, happy reading!